Well, hello there, and welcome to Money and Mindset at 40 Plus. I'm Jenny. No, I'm not. I'm Sylvia.
It's gonna be good, Sylvia.
You know, it's going to be a good episode. And when you go live and you don't even know your real name,
You know what? It's because we're like sisters, so we
we go back
mutate.
and
Yeah,
forth.
exactly.
We go back and forth. So I am Sylvia.
And I think I'm Jenny.
You are. This is too funny. We're going to keep this though because this is live and that's what it's
Yeah,
all about. I love it. I love it.
that's awesome.
We're here to help you conquer your money fears. Money
Yes.
fears so you can make more and live more. Isn't that right?
Don't we all want that, Sylvia?
I know I do. I know
Yeah.
I do.
So,
And today we're delving into money stories,
mhm,
which
mhm.
are the underlying of the money fears, and what we're hoping for our listeners to get out of this episode today is to uncover your money stories, find out where they come from, how they're manifesting, how your
Mhm.
money stories are manifesting in your business, in your life, in your careers,
Yeah,
because they do. They manifest in a
yeah,
whole bunch of different ways. And then start taking the steps to
yeah,
change these money stories. It doesn't mean your money stories will evaporate
yeah,
forever, right? Because
yeah.
this is a long term. It's like because there are always new ones
Absolutely.
that come up.
And Sylvia, you're going to be talking a little bit about some of the stories you're hearing around you, and you have a lovely story about your kids too. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring that up
Mm-hmm.
as well, because
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the ultimate goal here is to conquer our own money stories so that we can share and celebrate those positive stories with the people around us, right?
Yes.
That's the end goal. And live in a world of abundance. And that starts with having a view of abundance around money, which I'd be curious if anybody's out there, as you're putting into the comments there, do you align with the statement, my money mindset is one of abundance? I'd love to see what folks are saying on the chat. But before that, Sylvia, would it be okay if I started with a story?
Yes, because I wanted to find out, yeah, what's one thing that maybe you learned about money when you were
Mhm.
growing up?
Mhm. So I will tell you a story about Christmas dinner in Deep River. You have to imagine the two tables beside each other, Sylvia, the table for the grown-ups and the card table at the end. We all know what that looks like, right? So we got and then like this. And I don't know how old I was. I must have been about 7 or 8. Anyway, young enough. And my dad has 3 brothers. And we were sitting around Christmas dinner, and you have to imagine the jellied compote salad things. Do you guys remember the jellied sandwich, the green and the
It
who
always
puts
had things inside of it. I
cottage
don't know.
cheese, right? Cottage
Yeah.
cheese and jello. But anyway, and we were talking about something, and I piped up because Uncle Murray had said something, or it was Uncle Robbie actually that said something about da 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 about his payroll or his work or something. And I piped up and said, "How much money do you make, Uncle Robbie?" And there was this awkward silence.
Mm.
And then Uncle Robbie said, "Not enough." And everybody
Mm-hmm.
erupted in laughter. And my basic emotion was total confusion. What, why are we laughing? What's going on? And then my dad sort of pulled me aside later and said, Jenny, it's not polite to talk about money. It's not a subject we bring up. And I was 7, Sylvia. So I was trying to
Mm.
process all of this. And the whole experience kind of left me with confusion, but I want to bring up a big word, shame, that I had done something wrong. And so from that moment, I think I understood that money was not something we talk about.
Right, right. And I think that's a very common money
Yeah.
story in people's
Yeah.
families. It's
Yeah.
like religion, politics, and money. You don't talk about them. It creates friction, it creates trouble, it
Yeah.
creates, discussion, bad discussions.
Yeah.
And, one thing that's interesting is that that's your dad's story,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that
Mm-hmm.
he shared that with you,
Mm-hmm.
and then it got, it glued to you as a child, and it's
Yeah.
probably been, that you've seen this coming up as an
Yeah.
adult.
Yeah. And I know I've done a lot of research and reading about brains and the way the brain remembers things. And the amygdala, which is the one that goes, "Oh, I know where that memory is," psh, pulls it back. The amygdala is very tied to emotional or intense feelings. So interesting. Louise says she was told the same thing,
Yeah.
right? So that amygdala goes back and finds that memory and says, "Ooh, don't go back there. That's a
Yeah.
bad place,"
Well,
right?
it's
So
scary.
it's genetic, right? Like there's a whole brain wiring thing that's going on, which maybe that's my head speaking to you, Sylvia, not my heart.
Mm-hmm.
But it helps me have some compassion for that little girl, right? Who
Mm.
didn't know any better,
Right.
did that.
Well, and I look at one of my own stories was with my daughter, my little
Mm-hmm.
8-year-old, and my kids. I do voice work, and my
Yep.
children do voice work as
Yep.
well. And my kids will often tell people how much they make per
Mm-hmm.
job. And one of my daughters does the voice of Baby Shark, and we were actually where you live at a festival in the winter, and she was talking to one of the vendors, and she says, "You know what? I'm the voice of Baby Shark, and I make $400 a video, and I'm there. I'm waiting for $800 to go into my bank account." And my first reaction was to, I looked at my husband, and I was gonna like jump on her and take her away, and like, no, 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 we don't, you know. But then I was like,
Yep.
you know what? No, I stopped myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I said yes, and she was very proud of it. And I said, "You are a
Wonderful.
great gal, making
Mm-hmm.
making money, and you're only 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing?"
Yeah.
But those feelings,
Oh God.
I don't think I've digged enough in that, what came
Mm-hmm.
up and where that came from, but
Yeah.
it's very similar to yours. We don't
So
talk about money.
we don't talk about it. So for those of you listening, it's that moment. You just described it really well. That moment where you catch yourself.
Mm,
So maybe we put that as homework for this week, for the show.
yeah.
Anybody listening, when you have those funny moments or there's something that's not right, I think noticing is really important, and I want to flag that.
Mm,
So Sylvia, let's, for some of us on the call, this might be new. This idea of a money story.
yeah.
What is a money story?
Yeah, they are beliefs that we have surrounding money. And that we might have, we have learned these stories or these beliefs, often limiting beliefs
Mm-hmm.
from our parents, and they've learned them from their grandparents. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very ancestral. It goes back.
Yeah.
And until we are realizing that we have these and we're stopping ourselves,
Yeah.
and then we are sharing them with our own children. And because they're most often limiting, I mean, there are positive money stories, of course, when we
Absolutely.
start doing this work. Like, me not stopping my daughter. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now she's not going to have this. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
money can be talked about and it's okay, right? So we're
Right.
changing them, but so they're often limiting beliefs. I grew up, I remember my dad, money doesn't grow on
Yep.
trees.
Me too.
Money is the root of all evil. Oh, look at them. They've got, oh gosh, they've got a new car. Oh, what did they do to get that? And always
Mm-hmm.
looking over, and, oh, rich people, they're,
Yeah.
they're jerks. Rich people are jerks. So that
Mm-hmm.
means, oh, well, then I don't want to be a jerk, so then I shouldn't be rich. And we're little, we're small when we hear these
Yeah.
stories, and we don't have the language
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
dissect it all and to say, hey, that's not right.
Yeah.
And I only did this work much later in life.
Yeah.
And then realizing, hey, and all these stories start coming up. So if you're listening to this, what are the
Yeah.
stories that are coming up that we recall our parents
Yeah.
telling us and about their beliefs about
So
money?
I love to hear some folks' stories in the comments. Always
Mm,
keen to have them afterwards or in the YouTube part as well. So I want to tell a positive story because
mm,
it's actually not my story, but I love the story. So those of us on this call, many of us are fundraisers. I work with fundraising coaches.
yeah.
I work as a coach of fundraising leadership folks. Money stories are one of the things that is most difficult to convey or work with at a board of directors level. You may have a different money story. And I love this one. So this was a young woman who grew up in a small town. And in her small town, as a person, the rich people in town were incredibly philanthropic.
Mm.
So we're very generous, very present, very happy to give to the local hospital, to the whatnot. And she described when she grew up, moving to a new town and becoming a fund development person. And the assumption that all rich people were very philanthropic, and the
Ah,
shock that they weren't all philanthropic
they're
was like
not.
this
No.
big shock to her. And that's something in fundraising we talk a lot about. People may be wealthy, but to have the criteria of wanting to help and be philanthropic may or may not be something they've learned through their
Mm-hmm.
personal experiences. They may or may not have been touched by philanthropy. Family stories, when we talk about intergenerational money and long histories of wealth in the family. My mind goes to the Molson families and the Bronfmans and those sort of iconic Aspers, all those iconic, wonderful families who were part of building the fabric of Canada. Fascinating to hear how they pass on their money values to their next generations. And
Right.
I'll finish here that it's not as organic as it sounds, right? To grandpa's values around money and going through the Second World War and the having the scarcity, to grandchildren really thinking very differently and wanting to give to the environment or other values or other things that are different. So those money stories, Sylvia, what do you see? What are familiar money stories you see with your clients? I'm just curious.
Oh, so interesting. As you know, I work with women business owners, most often small business owners.
Yeah.
It comes out in different ways. A feeling of not being good enough. I don't deserve wealth. I don't know enough, to Sylvia, to be wealthy. And I actually fall into that pattern sometimes, which I am in the present moment digging as I want to move up in my business. No matter what level that is. Also, the belief that you have to work really hard. And I think that also comes from parents, right? When you're in school, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't work really hard. My son said to me yesterday, he says, "Oh, Mom, I get really good grades and I don't have to work hard. But my friend, gosh, he gets, maybe 5 points more than I do. You might get a 95, but he studies so much." He's like, "I don't really have to work so hard." And I was going to say, "But you should maybe if you worked hard." And stop myself again. Those are feelings of coming up. So that belief that we have to work really hard. And maybe we don't. Maybe it's just putting better systems in place. So I work with that with my clients. Those who have a hard time raising their prices, playing too small. I know you're laughing because we've talked a lot about that, you and I, right? Or that you're always broke, living paycheck to paycheck. I think a lot of business owners and people in general, we do. I think we live in that society where the debt ratio is very, very high, and we do. In French, we have an expression here in Quebec, "On est né pour un petit pain." So we are born for a small piece of bread. And it translates into we're not born for the whole loaf, basically. We're not born for big things, right? And it's very
limiting,
very limiting, and it's cultural. And my mom said, she heard that her whole life. On est né pour un petit pain. I think that's the exact expression. Someone can correct me, and also giving services away, feeling that why am I charging for this when it's so easy to give it away? And as women in the health, and I deal a lot with wellness and healthcare, female-dominated careers and jobs. It's often, I think you called it the paid compassion work. Isn't that what you call it?
I did. That's in a coming up show. I think we called it "Nice Girls Charge Less," I think is next week's show. And I just picking up on Louise's comment about that's a man's wage. What an interesting loaded sentence.
Right, Louise?
And they don't, I just want to pick up too on, they don't mean anything by it. In other words, that's the way they were raised. And it's not that we want you to come away from the show and hate your parents.
No,
we want you to come away the show and realize, oh, that's so interesting that they think that way. Is that my belief as well? Right. And I was raised in a world where we respect our elders. So this gets really challenging for me as well. So that idea of the ancestors too, Sylvia, I just wanted to pick up on that, is making sure that, that is our history, but that doesn't have to be our future. And there's nothing wrong with honoring our past and our ancestors by finding a new place. Laura likes the paid compassion work idea.
Well, if we look at it at our generation, and we're talking to 40 plus here, our grandparents, like you said, lived through the wars, right? Our children, it will be somewhat different, so the stories, like you said, will evolve. We're evolving, and it's different. My grandfather came from Hungary here and was very poor, a poor musician, didn't make money, surviving on gig to gig. And then my dad is also an artist, and that it just all these different, it's so interesting. If we can ask your parents and grandparents if they're still alive, delve into their stories a little bit. And it's, like you said, very interesting. Yeah. Let's go back to 1995.
Well, I'd have to have bigger hair, first of all, right?
Yeah. The hairspray. Yeah. Let's go
Actually, no,
back.
no. You and I had pixie cuts.
We had small Liza Minnelli
Yes.
haircuts, I think, at the time.
So
We need to find a picture.
I was going to say, we'll find a picture for you guys. So the things I remember from 1995, I was graduating from McGill. So were you, or almost graduated? I remember that we were musicians. We were poor. We were happy. I remember taking out $200 a month and putting it in my side drawer table. And that was the money for the month, if you can believe it. Right?
Wow.
And neither of us, I don't think, went into music for money, right?
Definitely not. That was not, and hats off to my parents. I did have very open parents. My dad being an artist, the arts were important, and they just said, do whatever you want to, Sylvia. You will be a success at whatever that is. And they I didn't have a parent that said you have to be a lawyer or a doctor. I didn't have that. I don't think you did either.
Nope.
Yeah, so it was really, follow your passion, which that is one story I will pass on to my kids as well. However, teaching them more about money than I got taught, right? Because again, the teaching I felt, in my past, and I'm sure we'll delve into that another time. But those stories, change afterwards, right? They start to change when in the real world. I mean, that $200 didn't go very far for very long.
And, I think back on how even I went to New York City, and guys on the call, maybe you can all remember this when you were kids, or when you were younger, the bank account would almost hit $1,000 and then it would pop back down again. And
right.
Almost hit $1,000. And that's like, the funny part is they kind of assume that's the way everybody works until you want something different. I think that's the point about the stories and about owning your worth, or saying, I'm responsible for making these changes.
Oh my gosh, Jenny. Well, after my music degree, I traveled for a year, and I came back and I said, what is it that I need to be doing? What am I going to do with my life? And oh my gosh, I didn't want to be working at 10 million jobs as a musician. And I said, I said out loud, I don't want to have the same story that my parents had. I don't want to have the living from paycheck to paycheck. So I went and did an MBA. So we're
Pretty
music
bold.
to management, rather than perhaps continuing with what I really wanted to do, which was perhaps more music. But I had fun. I mean, it's every step is an important step. But literally, taking the ancestors' money stories and saying, no, I don't want this.
Did you feel very different in your MBA? I never asked you that. Did you feel like a fish out of water? How did it feel?
Well, I was a musician and I was 25. Yes, I was the musician. And what is she doing here? Funny, at that age, I didn't. I was smart. And I had good grades in the class, and I was different though, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I want to put another plug in. I'm realizing this show is becoming a plug for arts degrees too, but that element of creativity and the element of stick-to-itness that you learn in that world. But and you took on debt to do that, Sylvia, right?
I took a lot of debt. I will say that I had student loans for both my bachelor's and my master's. So I came out of there with $30,000 worth of debt.
Yeah.
And I paid it off. I paid it off by the end of my 20s. So if I was 25, 26 when I finished, 27, and paid it off in a few years. So I didn't have children at the time. I was single, so it was easier at that point, and I was very minded to do so. And which was a positive. I think the positives, positive money stories then. It's only when I get to my 40s when I started my business, and then wanting something different, perhaps not having all the tools, and then getting caught up in, business owner issues that I've never had to deal with before. And then money stories started popping up, more of the negative ones.
Yeah. And managing employees and all that, and wanting to provide for them and all those things, right, Sylvia?
Oh, yeah, of course. And building a business and wanting to up-level. I'm very ambitious when it comes to my business and my businesses. And I want to keep going. And that's just part of one of the archetypes we talked about. We talked a little bit about archetypes, and we'll talk more. But my second archetype is ruler. So it's building an empire, right? The products and the classes and the coaching. And that's just, do you remember what your second archetype is?
It's probably nurturer or connector. I'm pretty sure it's one of those two. And the other thing I like about this, Sylvia, those from the call, it's very rare that we see women role models say, I'm ambitious. I want
Mm-hmm.
to, and I think that we need to say it more. I want to do good work. Those of you on the call, I want to have a better business. I want to help more people. For me, it's I want to raise more money so I can help all those missions. I want to
Mm.
empower people to have the confidence to ask for more zeros, more dollars, more whatever, and by conquering, or at least looking at those money stories, it's going to take some time. Maybe not conquering on the episode 2, right, Sylvia?
Is that, yeah.
Yeah, but listening to the stories, noticing it will start to shift, and that's the exciting part.
Mm.
So whether it's money stories, we need a show for this one with your husband, right? Money stories with your boss at work, about approach or
Yeah.
strategy, about asking for a raise, whether it's money stories around having a contractor do work in your backyard.
Mm.
All of those things, just being aware of them. I think, is that our homework for folks this week? I can't believe it's 11:21. This just goes
Yeah,
so fast.
I know it really does. It really
Yeah,
does. And yeah, I think part of the homework is, what's coming up for you. And
yeah,
now that we've talked about a little bit,
yeah,
a few of our money stories, we're seeing in our businesses
yeah,
and with our clients,
yeah,
what is coming up for you? Journal
yeah,
whenever these strong emotions come up. This is when we see that's a story that's
yeah.
there. Why am I feeling this way? It's a
Right.
trigger. I know it can be hard to do this. It really can. You might
Yeah.
end up crying. You might end up frustrated or angry, or raging to your family, by your parents. Why did you tell me this? Why?
Or in my world, you might just get really, really busy and won't have time to talk about it.
Or right.
Just saying.
Just saying, right?
Just
Different
saying.
ways of reacting. Another After you've thought about this, rewrite your story.
Mm,
What is the story that you would love to be living right now?
yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
a great one,
Yeah.
right? We're so focused on our goals and our,
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
revenue we're doing, but what is the story we want to
Yeah.
be living?
Yeah.
Abundance. What does that look like?
Yeah.
What actions do we need to take
Mm-hmm.
then to get there?
Mm-hmm.
What does a person who has that money story that you would love to aspire
Yeah.
to, what are they actually thinking? What
Yeah.
would you think that they're thinking? If you knew what they were thinking, what would that be? Write that all
Right.
down.
And the ticker tape. So when you say that, I'm going to own the fact that my ticker tape is, I don't need that much.
Mm.
Right? So write that
Mm-hmm.
down, because I think that's another thing. And some of us that are called to this work, whether it's compassion work as a business owner, whether it's I'm going to yoga owners or nurses or educators, like, it doesn't mean that doing good work means that you can't want things. And that you don't necessarily need a Maserati, but a car that works, that has a good radio. If you like music, that's okay. And it's okay to want things, and it's okay to line up your self-worth and your contribution in society to make that happen for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
Well, very good, Jenny.
it's
And
good.
I think many of us have children,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah,
many of us at this
yeah,
stage of life are coming out. When you have a baby and a newborn, we forget the self.
yeah,
Our self is put on the back burner for
yeah,
many years for many
yeah,
of us. And we're coming out of that
yeah.
now. And many of you have maybe already come out of it. That's wonderful. But always coming back, well, what does what does Jenny want? What do you want, Jenny? Right? And taking the time to think about that.
I love that.
What is
Okay.
that money story that I want?
I'm
What do
taking that one as homework, Sylvia. Okay. I'm going
Mm.
to own that one, because remember, guys, this is a co-coaching session. So Sylvia and I are on the hook just as much as you guys listening. We've given you some good homework. Notice those stories, write them down, journal. Next week's show, I'm very excited about this. Nice girls charge less. And what belief how would you change if you believed that compassion was priceless?
Mm. Yes, that's it. That's going to be amazing. That is going to be amazing. Well, thank you everyone for
Yep.
listening. Last words, Jenny?
That's all the time we have for today. Be sure to subscribe, put comments. We want to hear from you. It's the weirdest thing for us to talk into a vacuum. We want to know you guys. Share it if you're enjoying this. Pass it on to a couple girlfriends, because we know there's others out there like us. And let's create a movement. Let's get talking about money so we can all thrive, conquer our fears, and live our lives of abundance. That sounds so cheesy, but it is possible, Sylvia.
It is. It is. That's what we're striving for. And
Yeah.
I want to hear those money stories. So please do
Yeah.
put them in the comments, or little tidbits of phrases that your parents have told you. Those get me going.
So to close out, I'm Sylvia.
That's right. I'm Jenny. Not.
Not. Have a great week.
That was priceless. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Mwah.
See you next Thursday at 12. Bye.
Bye.